The Senate Finance Committee will vote today on whether to advance the nomination of Robert F. Kennedy Jr. for Health and Human Services Secretary. The fate of Kennedy's bid could fall upon Republican Senator Bill Cassidy of Louisiana. Senator Cassidy, a medical doctor, is a member of the Finance Committee and chairman of the Health Committee, the other panel that held a hearing for RFK Jr. He has openly struggled with Kennedy's nomination. Meanwhile, another of Trump's cabinet picks just picked up a key endorsement ahead of her committee vote later today. Republican Senator Susan Collins of Maine has announced she will vote in favor of Tulsi Gabbard for Director of National Intelligence. She explained her decision to reporters yesterday.
After extensive consideration, conversations with her in my office, attending the hearing, questioning her there, and listening to her in the closed session, I decided to vote that I will vote for her. I believe she's committed to strengthening our national security. And I questioned her extensively about her views on Edward Snowden, and I am now satisfied that she will not seek in any way to have him pardoned, which was a question that I answered in open session.
You know, there's an old saying in soccer, in English football, it's the hope that kills you.
Yeah.
I suspect they have a similar saying in Maine about Susan Collins. It's a hope that kills you. I wonder, Richard, if she was assured by the way Tulsi Gabbard handled her relationship with the butcher of Syria, Assad, responsible for the murder of 500,000 Syrians also, who used chemical weapons against his own people, or again, Edward Snowden, where she refused to condemn Snowden in one question after another question after another question. Susan Collins, supposedly a traditional Republican, there is no way she would ever vote for Tulsi Gabbard except for political expediency and fear. Is there, Richard? I'll put that in question form.
Thank you for that rhetorical question, Joe. No, what comes to mind, Joe, is remember Abba Eban, the former Israeli foreign minister, and he once famously said about Palestinians, they never miss an opportunity to miss an opportunity. Well, Susan Collins never misses an opportunity to disappoint. She's a serial disappointer. And Tulsi Gabbard rarely misses an opportunity to get it wrong. The only good news is this is not the most critical job in the U.S. government. The Office of the Director of National Intelligence has I'm not saying it's insignificant, but there's more important jobs, Secretary of Defense, the head of the CIA, and so forth. But that said, she's not qualified to the job. She's been, shall we say, consistently wrong in her judgments. And the idea that she might be confirmed for this is another, It's just another disappointment, and it's a head shaker.
Yeah.
She also has endorsed the Russian view of the war in Ukraine, among many other things that people are concerned about, but it appears she now has Senator Collins' vote. Meanwhile, there's RFK Jr. In his latest editorial titled RFK's Hearings Remove All Doubt, He is Not Fit to Lead a Key Federal Health Agency, the New York Post editorial board writes this morning, quote, Robert F. Kennedy Jr.'s two-day Senate confirmation hearing should remove all doubt. He is absolutely unfit to head the Department of Health and Human Services. Look, it's never wrong to ask questions, even about settled science. But Kennedy has spent a near lifetime promoting a dangerous outright lie about vaccines, even in the face of hard proof that they work. That might have dissuaded many people from getting them and then later contracting illnesses they could have prevented. Oh, and by coincidence, his anti-big pharma claims just so happen to supply ammunition for fellow lawyers suing those companies. Most of all, Kennedy lacks basic skills to run a large federal agency, particularly one where following the science is actually vital. Senators need to block RFK Jr.'s nomination and keep America healthy again. the New York Post editorial board. Ali Vitale, so are there Republican senators willing to block RFK Jr.'s nomination in a way that they have not been willing to for any other nominee so far?
Maybe. We watched the public struggle for one of the key Republican senators here, Bill Cassidy of Louisiana. He, of course, chairs the HELP committee, but he's also on the Finance committee. So we'll get a little bit of instruction later this morning about if the struggle actually ends up yielding anything in terms of saying no to RFK's nomination. Now, the initial test is going to be in the Finance committee later this morning. They're going to vote RFK Jr. out of that committee. They can either recommend him favorably or unfavorably. So if Cassidy decides that's where he wants to show his cards, that's where he wants to say no, then we'll see it be reported unfavorably, but it doesn't really do anything. That nomination still goes to the floor. And then, of course, there's the question of if Cassidy would keep that kind of a no vote on the floor. And all of this is really theoretical because Cassidy has told reporters time and again in the halls of Congress that he doesn't want to talk about this. But the thing that has the common thread for all of the people that we talk about during these confirmation battles, whether it's Joni Ernst with Pete Hegseth, Tom Tillis with Pete Hegseth, Bill Cassidy for RFK Jr., Susan Collins for Tulsi Gabbard, the common thread is all of these people are going to be on a ballot in 2026. Some of them have already received primary challenges, but that threat is something that comes up in every conversation that I have with my sources on the Hill about this. The politics looms so large over everything. Elon Musk and the millions that he could throw into a primary challenge, others who can ignite the MAGA base online and direct their ire at some of these senators, all of that is factored in. And it really is a sign of how palpable the politics of a primary is in this MAGA era. And frankly, as much as we talk about Trump and Elon's relationship and its potential to fray or fracture, this is actually one of the things that continues to work in Elon Musk's favor within the Trump administration, is that he, in addition to the work that he's trying to do in government, is also the guard dog of the MAGA agenda because he can leverage millions at primary challenges. And all of that is in the mix here on Capitol Hill.
I mean, it's the same catch-22, though, that Republicans have faced for some time. People like Susan Collins. Susan Collins is going to be carrying Tulsi Gabbard around on her shoulder if she gets through a primary in Maine and then runs in a general election. She's going to have to justify that vote. She's going to have to justify a lot of other votes. The same with Tom Tillis, who's going to have to justify a vote for Pete Hegseth. And Katty Kay, the question is, we talked about the doctor, Bill Cassidy, down in Louisiana, but every Republican is going to have to justify a vote for RFK Jr., who again has been what appears to be anti-science, and just on the working knowledge appears not to know the difference between Medicare and Medicaid. He couldn't even answer that question when asked about the difference between Medicare and Medicaid.
Yeah, and remember, Tulsi Gabbard and Kennedy are both Democrats. You'd think that they might be easier for senators to vote against with their own constituents, saying that, you know, we disagree on principle or ideology. The Wall Street Journal had a fascinating TikTok of the 24 hours that it took for Tom Tillis to go from a no on Pete Hegseth to a yes on Pete Hegseth, and the amount of pressure that was put on him. And that's not even the Joni Ernst-style online pressure that could or could not be orchestrated by Elon Musk if he chose to. Some members of Congress that I've spoken to said, listen, it's not just the primarying that we have to worry about. It's actually our own personal safety that we now have to worry about. I have to worry about the safety of my spouse, the safety of my children, if I defy Donald Trump. And when you've got Don Jr. coming out very forcefully and saying, we want all of these to be a yes, there is no exception for Tulsi Gabbard, there is no exception for Bobby Kennedy, he is speaking for the MAGA base. And literally I've had members of Congress say, look, you know, you do have to worry in this day and age, you have to worry about your own safety as well. It's not just the primarying factor.
Yeah, and guys, I was on the Hill last Thursday during that day where they had hearings all happening at once for Kennedy and Patel and Tulsi Gabbard, and they were talking to congressional aides. The thing is, it's about the math. What's so hard for these Republican senators is being that one vote who can be blamed. It's hard to be that fourth vote if you are assuming that Collins and Murkowski and McConnell, who showed a willingness to defy Trump, are going to be three. Now, in Tulsi Gabbard's case, Susan Collins didn't even get there, though we know there are some other Republican senators who have real concerns about her. We're watching Todd Young from Indiana as well. But the issue is, it's so hard to do it with four. And these aides were saying what they would really need would be a bunch of senators to come together to say no. So therefore, it could be 5, 6, 7, or 8. And therefore, that one person doesn't get all the blame, and potentially that Elon Musk-backed primary challenge.
The danger.
Well, and let's again underline what Kathy just said. Members of Congress are telling her that they're not only afraid of primary challenges, they're afraid of violence. They're afraid of violence if they vote against people who are unqualified to run the most important agencies in America.
That's definitely not how it's supposed to work.